I'm back once again with another video showcasing 10 AI art styles you can add to your Midjourney prompts, separated like a comma, to get some images similar to the ones I'm about to show you. The first one is streamer, gamer, mascot logo. Now, a lot of gamers out there and streamers have these logos that are kind of like a vectorized character logos, and I thought this would be a really cool thing to work on, and I found that this phrase does a really good job. So you see Darth Vader's been converted into this cool kind of like vector style image. Adding this into Vectorizer.ai or some kind of vector conversion software, you could really use this quite effectively, I think, in a lot of these cases. The futuristic car does a great job of isolating and kind of vectorizing the look of that car. There are a few little bits and pieces, there's some gradients and a few little funny artifacts near the wheel, but overall I think it's a great starting point if you're looking to create a vectorized gaming or streaming logo. Incredible Hulk. I love the way it adds the headphones. Because we've got streamer or gamer in there, I kind of like the way it's added that in there, because most gamers who are streaming tend to wear headphones when they play video games. And of course, Terminator. He's got that Terminator look again with the hair, but with the headphones on. I've mentioned this a lot in the last few videos. For some reason, that version 6 of Midjourney likes to combine the hair and facial features with the endoskeleton for some reason. And the samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji. This one, a lot of them didn't turn out like this, but this one in particular had Mount Fuji in the foreground and a really cool kind of like negative space style. I really like what it does with some of these images, and just remember, a lot of these styles here will work most of the time. Sometimes you're going to get some that don't work for you, but they're definitely worth having a play around with and keeping the prompts nice and simple. And of course, a woman's face. It's just a woman who's wearing the headphones with the mic, and she's now able to play and stream, and it's her nice logo there. I like the way it included the purples and pinks, kind of the neon colors with it, and adds a little bit of a sort of energetic vibe to the image. And grid layout. Now this one is one of those, it's kind of nothing special, but I do like what it does. It tends to put things into grids. Now this one in particular looks like it's been drawn onto grid paper, but you tend to get a different result here and there with the grid. So if I move on to Darth Maul, we've got this kind of digital grid style, almost like MPEG artifacts or something around his skin. So I really like the impact it's had on that, where the way it's chosen to apply the grid over his face. Move on to Batman, and this one's a less intense version of the same thing, where it's got kind of like a digital style applied to it, but isolated on the yellow background. I really appreciated the aesthetic of that. And of course, Popeye. I haven't done Popeye before, but this way he's put into a grid. It's actually kind of like tiles, and I think this was a very interesting effect overall. Mickey Mouse, similar to Popeye, kind of like that tile effect where the grid creates like some physical grid pieces, and the grid's not perfect in this one. I noticed that some of the tiles and the grid pieces are larger around the outside, but still pretty cool. And the Terminator, this one, going for that more digital style, but it's also got bits of text and that around the outside. This is kind of like a broken up grid effect. It's not like a perfectly square grid, but you can see how it's applied the logic to the effects around the face. And minimal black and white logo. Now this is a great way to create a very minimalistic logo, which is great for actual graphic design. For example, a woman's face. Now this isn't necessarily a great logo, but you could use it or use part of it in a logo. But you can see how it's nice and clean and simple. Move on to the Incredible Hulk, and I think this is a pretty cool split logo with a good use of black and white to really illustrate that. Now that'd be very easy to convert to vector. Beautiful waterfall in nature. I thought this was also very cool and a little stylized as well, with the vertical lines and the way that the kind of like you got the vertical lines with the dots, and then you come down to the rocks and they turn horizontal. I actually like the simplicity of little concepts like that, little bits of direction change that make an image work well. And Darth Maul, another simple logo, something easy to convert, and then you could easily apply color to it if you really wanted to afterwards. But I like the idea of working with this. Now, it could try this with a whole bunch of other concepts or even letters. I've done it with Batman here, and again, nice, simple, like some single color logo. The Terminator. This one's a little less simple, but it's still simplistic in a very vector type fashion. And I like the way it's focused on the endoskeleton with this image in particular. That's why I chose it. But a very powerful term, and if you expand upon it, I think you could probably get a lot more out of it. So I might explore that further in the future. The samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji. This was a cool logo, and I thought something you could actually use. A really great interpretation of what we normally see. And then we're moving on to motion blur. Now, I've had someone ask me about styles that imply movement. I'm trying to work on a few of those, and this one was it's like the first try at that. Motion blur is pretty cool. Now with Batman, it's like he's running at the camera. So this is obviously with motion blur. It tends to be more sort of a zooming type effect, but every now and then you do get some direction. With the woman's face, it's kind of like she's flipped her hair around back and forth, and there's a bit of motion blur, kind of like a slow shutter speed photograph. And the samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji, he looks like he's about to attack Mount Fuji, and he's storming towards it like he's going to leap over the water, land on Mount Fuji, and start stabbing it with his sword. Probably gone a little bit nutty, but a cool effect visually. And the Incredible Hulk flying through the air at the camera has that really high movement sort of motion blur effect that I think makes this image look pretty cool. And Mario, he looks panicked and he is running away. Don't know what he's running away from, but I thought this image was kind of funny. Then of course the futuristic car, a little bit more direction with this one. I thought this was a great use of motion blur, having a car showing the speed that the car is moving and the way the lights kind of trail, and you've got that shutter speed effect again. Really, really cool picture. And the modern family home. Now, there were a few outside of the home where it looked like it just had a bit of camera shake. But if anyone here has kids, I'm pretty sure you can relate to this image where you have your nice clean home and the kids are just flying through it and making a mess. So I thought this image was pretty funny also. Refractive photograph. Now, this is kind of like, refractive is kind of like the refraction of light, where light separates through an object and you get kind of like that little rainbowy type sort of color effect or iridescent effect. And you can see how the light is going to have been refracted onto the woman's face. Very, very sort of specific style of photo. And with Batman, it's kind of changed the nature of his armor a little bit, and I think it created a light refraction background, and it's kind of made it a little bit iridescent. So I kind of like that effect. Darth Maul, similar again, where the light's kind of like split up and refracted on his skin. So the way it's choosing to sort of like make that light refractive is a little bit different from photo to photo. And the Incredible Hulk, a little bit more of a motion blur type effect, but I still liked it. Like I said, you don't always get a perfect impact with these styles, but they do make a difference and they're worth playing with. And the samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji, there's kind of like it's almost like looking at it through a diamond or something that's sort of splitting up pieces of light. And I thought this was a very interesting effect to be overlaid over that image. And Mickey Mouse, completely different again. We still got that light split effect, but just a different take altogether. I do get some very funky images when I use Mickey Mouse, so that in itself was almost a style to play with. White background doesn't seem like a style, but what it does to images is really, really interesting. If you want images that have nice, clean, white backgrounds and the subject cut out almost, this is a great way to get a sort of a higher chance of that result. As you can see with Batman, he's cut out on that white background. Beautiful waterfall in nature. Again, we've got the rocks, and it's kind of cut out again against a white background. But the way it's cut out with the shape, I think, is actually very useful, especially if you're a graphic designer. And the Incredible Hulk, he is cut out, and we've just isolated him as a subject. Moving on to the woman's face, same again. We've got her face there, white background. And again, if you decided to use pan on this or zoom, you could probably actually create more of the face around it and keep that nice white background if that's something you were using for photography or a graphic design of some sort. And of course, modern family home. It's pretty much the same as all the other images, but of course, white background, cut out. Even the leaves and that against the white background work pretty well. So I thought that was a really, once again, just a useful phrase. And Cutway Diagram. This is one of those things where it kind of like cuts through a subject to see and kind of show what's inside or internal. So you can see the woman's face, how it's chosen to create kind of like shows you what's inside of the skin and the mouth. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but it has the desired effect. Moving on to Batman. Apparently he's a cyborg and a machine, because you can see machine parts inside of him. So I don't think Midjourney really understands the concept of Batman. And the Terminator, it does tend to understand the concept of the Terminator, the way it shows the inner workings of the head and neck. I thought that was very cool and a really nifty effect for the Terminator. And a futuristic car. It's showing the engine, bits and pieces within. It's kind of like giving that translucent appearance to the body of the car on the outside and shining through to see the engine and even the tops of the wheels. Very nicely done. And Popeye, he is... it's like the inside of a boat inside of his head. So it could be a little bit more of an abstract idea for this one because Popeye isn't a boat, he's a person, but I actually thought that was pretty interesting because you can see kind of like boat type elements inside of his head there. Kaleidoscopic style. So if you ever look through a kaleidoscope and get that like that repeated sort of pattern, you can get some cool effects. Now, for some reason with the Incredible Hulk, it's chosen to go with like a low poly kind of style, but it still has that similar kaleidoscopic effect to it if you look at the way the pattern repeats behind him. Moving on to a beautiful waterfall in nature. The way it's done it with this is really cool because it's kind of symmetrical both vertically and horizontally, and it's really nailed that look. And the Terminator, this has kind of just made him symmetrical. I don't know why necessarily, but I thought it was worth sharing because it does have a symmetrical appearance to it. And Samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji, again, that similar sort of symmetrical look, but it's added some of the effects to that image in a very simplistic way with the red circle and the line going through the middle. Still, it's just interesting what it does to the subject you add it to. And Popeye, very different indeed. Still has a bit of an effect, but it's kind of like it's taken a kaleidoscope image, added the face to it, and made it three-dimensional like an object, which was an interesting take. And Diarama. This one's pretty predictable. It creates a diorama out of what you give it, and it does a good job of it. You move on to the Terminator. It's like a diorama of him walking around. You can see the old cars and the sort of battleground in front of him. Kind of like when we play with the action figure type styles, except we've got an actual full diorama to go with it. Darth Maul stepping out to go into battle to try and get Kenobi once again. And the Incredible Hulk, he is huge in this. If you look at the size of the buildings around him, very cool little diorama, something like you might actually see in real life. Futuristic car, I really love this one. The little model car in outer space, and the way it uses the depth of field and the blurring of the background creates a really, really tight photographic look, and I really appreciate that, or a macro photography look even. And Samurai standing in front of Mount Fuji, once again, a very cool detailed looking diorama style. It almost looks like the Mount Fuji in the background is just a print on a wall, and you've got the actual objects in front of it, which I think is a nice touch. Modern family home. I couldn't do this without adding the modern family home because it just turns it into a nice sort of diorama or model of a very modern house. I even love the way, if you look at the footpath at the start or at the front of the house, there's like bits of grass growing between the concrete. I thought that was a nice little touch by Midjourney there. And of course, Popeye. And I really just appreciate the water in this, to be honest. The house and the style. It doesn't really look like Popeye, but the elements around him, I think, are very on point, and it's just an interesting image. And a woman's face, a diorama of the woman's face was different. There's a few that had just the face, but this one kind of like was the most interesting take, and it's framed up nicely. It just looks pretty cool. Satellite photo. Now this was really cool. Everything looks like a satellite photo pretty much. If you move on to the Hulk, it's incorporated his face into the land. Not very effectively, but it's there. It's an interesting effect overall with the water around the island, and I don't think any land will actually ever look like that in particular, but still a nice abstract image. With Mario, it's decided to just throw him falling out of the sky with the satellite photo looking at the buildings around him. I just thought this was kind of funny, but a very cool image. And Darth Maul, he's just on the satellite. He's literally on the satellite looking at it and thinking, what the hell's going on here? And then we've actually got Popeye. This one I really liked. It blended Popeye's face into the land and water in a very interesting way. So it's like satellite imagery of an island, but done in a way which shows his face, but it still kind of looks like land. This one I thought was the most interesting image using this phrase. And a modern family home. It's just like a sky shot of that home. You can see the roof and the solar panels and things like that. So the angle at which it does these things is very interesting. And the Terminator. This one I thought was interesting because the Terminator is not actually in this. It's kind of like another one I did a few weeks ago. I can't remember what the phrase was, but the way it kind of uses the color scheme and that dystopian look, kind of like it's an old military base in the mountains, I thought it was a good touch. And those are the images for this week, guys. I hope you found them useful. Have a play with them, see what results you get, and just have fun. I hope you liked that video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. We'll be back soon with more of these. So otherwise, until then, have a great day, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching the video.